Thank you, Director Don Freed. It's always a pleasure coming here, and you very rightly pointed out, we have such an extensive collaboration now, almost a decade long. And this Academy of Cultural Diplomacy now is doing a great work in Berlin, because this is a very specialized area where you don't really find a lot of universities working. So you're doing a great job here. The topic, as we all see, in fact, it's very interesting that just, I think, yesterday or day before yesterday, with the same title, I had an article published in the Diplomat magazine as well. In the world of tourism, there's always these sort of, this yearning to find new, pristine places, because not everybody wants to do the usual, the Paris, London, and New York thing, or sort of, or certain islands. So within that area, where people want something authentic, something pristine, something really embedded in history, something representing a very unique culture, that is where Pakistan comes into play. As we all know, the region where Pakistan lies, South Asia, is rather a challenging region because of various issues that it's been facing over the years. Very recently, I'm sure that you must have read about what happened between India and Pakistan, and all sort of, all the stories coming out. Although it seems people in Pakistan are very happy because they apparently won the dogfight. No, on a lighter note. But the fact is that because of all these things happening, this is one area where Pakistan's credentials are not really as well known. Pakistan is a country which is more than double the size of Germany in area, almost 3 times the size in terms of population, and is located on the confluence of 3 dynamic regions: South Asia, Central Asia, and the Middle East. Pakistan represents a civilization which is more than 7,000 or 8,000 years old. In fact, it's one of the 3 oldest civilizations in the world, the Indus Valley civilization. I'm sure you must have heard about those great sites which manifest this amazing civilization, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. This civilization, in those times, when we had 3 major civilizations in the world 7,000, 8,000 years ago, was actually the most modern. In Mohenjo-daro, even today, if you visit that, it's in the province of Sindh in Pakistan, you can see that they had, in those times, the ruins would tell you that, running water and a sewage system. This is something that Europe did not have even 5,000, 6,000 years later. But that is just one aspect of tourism in Pakistan. I think, can we sort of, show some of the images of sort of, Pakistan as we go along? Bjorn? Yeah. Can you keep it moving? So that is basically the first aspect of the civilization which Pakistan represents. And just keep on moving every 5 or 10 seconds. I want you to imbibe as many visuals of Pakistan as possible in this time. So the Indus Valley civilization, from there on, we move to that period, basically where we had the birth of Hinduism, the Vedic period. From there on, a couple of thousand years later, we move to the Buddhist period. And Buddhism was literally born in what is today Pakistan. As we move forward in history, we come to the period of advent of Islam in South Asia. First brought by the Arab traders, then Muhammad bin Qasim, then subsequently a whole range of Muslim kings and invaders coming from Central Asia, Persia, Arabia. And they had such an influence on the history of the whole subcontinent, of course, but particularly this region, which is today Pakistan. And then we had the great sultans of Delhi, the Sultanate period. From there on, we moved to even a more wondrous period, which is known in history as the Mughal period. The great kings like Akbar the Great, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, Aurangzeb. And those were the kings which built those marvelous edifices such as Taj Mahal, the Delhi Fort, in Lahore, the Badshahi Mosque, the Shalimar Gardens, the Lahore Fort. From there on, we move to the British period, the colonial period. And we have such marvelous buildings of that period as well in cities like Lahore, Karachi, Faisalabad. And of course, then the independence of, which happened in 1947, and from there on, the modern day Pakistan. Now, in this milieu of history that I've mentioned, there were different cultural influences. And those are very beautifully represented by the 4 provinces of Pakistan. We have the province of Punjab. Punjab means the land of 5 rivers. And there we have the capital is that very old city of Lahore with its beautiful historical buildings. That is my hometown as well. We have then Sindh. That is where Islam landed for the first time. Capital is Karachi. That is a mega city of more than 20 million people. Even Lahore is about 12 million. Compare that with Berlin, which is like 4 million at most. Then we have the province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, where we have that beautiful historical city of Peshawar. Now that again is the province which has, from where a lot of invasions used to take place to this Indian subcontinent. And there's this very famous Khyber Pass. And again, we have the province of Balochistan, which is the biggest landmass in Pakistan. And there we have a beautiful coastline where we are building this new port of Gawada, which will be the centerpiece of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor project, which again is a centerpiece of the China's Brick and Road Initiative, BRI, or Road and Belt as it is popularly called. We also have Gilgit and Baltistan, which is known as the roof of the world, some of the most majestic mountains that you can find anywhere. I might mention that out of the top 20 mountains in the world, we have about 8 of them in Pakistan, including the second tallest in the world, the K2. And my favorite line here, which I always love to say is that, when we compare the tallest mountains in Europe to the tallest mountains in Pakistan, there's no comparison, of course. The tallest mountain in Europe is almost as high as the highest road in Pakistan, which is the Karakoram Highway at its highest point. We also have those majestic valleys and rivers and streams which fill the whole of northwest Pakistan. Because Pakistan has such a geographic variation. We have, on the one hand, you have the roof of the world and all those very, very green mountainous regions with those beautiful streams and rivers flowing everywhere. And then you have the plains of the Punjab, known as the granary of South Asia, with some wondrous cities like Lahore, I've mentioned, and Multan, those very historical cities. There are many others as well. The Sindh province, where flows the Indus River that mighty Indus River. Again, it has a unique landscape and the culture which very much is aligned to that landscape, with a lot of deserts as well, but some very, very fertile regions. In Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, we have a lot of mountains. The landscape is pretty rough in some places, but it's also very beautiful. I've been to many of those places. I mean, the minister, I'm sure, in his speech will highlight the beauty of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa much more than I can. Because the minister that here we have the senior minister of tourism from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa today with us. Then in Balochistan, we have some of the most beautiful coastline in the world. Much of it is not really touristically developed as yet. So in some ways, it's very pristine, very virgin. For those who like to go to those beaches, totally unspoiled beaches with untainted waters there, Gawada and beaches close to that. That is the place. Many, many years ago, before we had the Afghan war, before we had this challenge of terrorism, which literally destroyed the tourism in Pakistan. As a child, even I remember the times when our cities used to be filled with a lot of tourists from Europe, particularly countries like Germany and France and UK. And Pakistan used to be a part of what people called the hippie trail. All those young people with long hair and sort of, very kind of, like carefree, nonchalant lifestyle would come all the way, many through sort of, Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, and then to Pakistan. And particularly in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, where Landi Kotal and all those cities used to be their favorite haunts. Of course, other than the beauty of the country itself and the cultural sort of, like enrichment, they were also interested in what was, the cannabis, the hash. That was part of the reason as well. And as you know, in many, many countries today, it has been legalized. We haven't legalized it in Pakistan yet. And now there are many, many sort of, like better reasons to come to Pakistan. But it's all part of history. See some of these beautiful mountains that you see here. I mean, I've seen some of these sort of, personally, I've been to all these regions of Pakistan. And I can tell you, they are just spellbinding. Because if you go to Switzerland, for instance, it's beautiful. We are talking about mountains which are like 3, 4, 5, 6, and maybe 4, 5,000 meters at best high. In Pakistan, it goes from 5, 6, 7, 8, So that is a totally different ballgame. Just look at the beauty of it. Besides that, like in any other country where people go for tourism, people want to find hospitality. You want to see people who are friendly to you, people who welcome tourists, people who are, who are interested in becoming a part of your stay there. So in Pakistan, in many, many surveys that have taken place, it has been brought out that the people of Pakistan are extremely hospitable and friendly. There always is, I know that, when somebody is going in that region, security is always sort of, something which comes to mind. And that is because Pakistan faced this scourge of terrorism, not because of our own doing, because of the fact that we happen to be situated next to Afghanistan, which has been a theater of civil wars and sort of, it's been a turf war between superpowers for many, many years. And the spillover effect, of course, has has affected Pakistan. But the good news is that in the last many years, particularly in the last 3-4 years, the fight against terrorism is almost won. In Pakistan now, now you don't really hear of sort of, those big terrorist incidents. And particularly when it comes to tourism, we haven't had, touch wood, any incident involving tourists in the last many years. So in that way, Pakistan is very safe. For instance, in Gilgit-Baltistan, the governor of Gilgit-Baltistan was here last year, and in fact, he spoke at this very platform. He told me that last year they had a record number of tourists, so many that there was not even a single room available in any hotel in the entire Gilgit-Baltistan. And Gilgit-Baltistan is as big as the biggest lander in the whole, in Germany. At one point, he said there were 70,000 cars on the roads in Gilgit-Baltistan. This is, like we're talking about, these very, very high altitude places where the roads are not, they're not really motorways, but very nice roads. And there was literally no place to move. So suddenly there has been so much tourism, started in that region. And why is that? Because people have started realizing that there is this just amazing landscape that they probably would see nowhere in the world. There are these amazing people who are so friendly and calm and so joyous and hospitable. And also, again, these places, well, you could find some very nice hotels and rest houses and places to stay. Airbnb is always a choice. They're very inexpensive compared to tourism everywhere, in most places in the world. So it's a great combination. And to promote more tourism, the government of Pakistan, the new government, the PTI-led government, Imran Khan, our new Prime Minister, he's somebody who's very, very keen on tourism. In fact, a few years back, he undertook a journey through Pakistan, where he personally went to literally all the far-off places where nobody ventures normally, and actually did a book on that. So to promote that, what is the government doing? First of all, of course, dissemination information, that is one thing. Unless people know what there is to see, of course, who would think of going there? The second thing is the visas. So the government of Pakistan, I'm very glad to announce, is going to make it very easy for foreign tourists to come to Pakistan for tourism. In fact, starting within a month, we are going to have visas on arrival for most countries in the world, including almost all the countries in Europe. So tourists would not have to think about this hassle of getting a visa. Similarly, in terms of the availability of hotels, in terms of making your travel bookings plans, and even today we were at the ITB where we have a booth particularly focusing on Gilgit-Baltistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. There are a lot of tour operators there who are making those bookings. They can plan everything, for all the tourists, whether in groups or individually. Then again, in Pakistan, you'd always have more bang for your buck there, as I said. Your money travels much farther there than in most places of the world. So I would strongly, urge all of you to look at Pakistan as a tourism destination, as a place, as a fascinating place where you'd see unique cultures, you'd see an amazing slice of history, some of the oldest civilizations, wonderful people, some of the most unique landscape in the world, and some of the most pristine beaches in the world. I would finish at that. I'm sure the Minister of Tourism from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, who is sitting amongst us today here, would be able to elaborate upon that much further. Thank you.
Your Excellency, before you leave the podium, we always like to give the audience a chance to ask questions or make comments. If Pakistan. I think he'd be open to discuss.
Actually, that's a part I love. Q&A. Okay.
I told them earlier, they're half of the responsibility for this conference. So if they
So-
don't ask good questions, it's their fault. So
Yeah.
any questions or comments you'd like to have, the ambassador is super knowledgeable, also super friendly. So I'm sure he'd be happy to receive any comments or questions.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Please, yes,
yeah.
okay. Anyone here?
Yes.
If you could stand, please, and
Yeah.
briefly introduce yourself.
Question. Do you have any special program for special programs?
Mhm. Yeah. So, any special programs?
Well, let's say the base for the climate control.
Oh, you see,
You said that the terrorism is over in Pakistan now.
Mhm.
So do you have any special program
Mhm.
to develop this region?
Yeah.
in the future, actually?
Peshawar is the capital of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. It is an amazing city, a very historical city. And there's so much to see there. And also, one thing which I probably didn't mention, and this gives me a chance to mention that as well. The cuisine in Pakistan is again a big attraction. You know, I know that a lot of people are familiar with Indian cuisine. There's a lot of Indian restaurants here in this city, Indian cuisine as they call it. But most of them, by the way, are actually Pakistanis. I mean, you see the Indians, I mean, the real Indian cuisine, I mean, so if you call it particularly like let's say the Hindu cuisine, does not have meat. But that doesn't sell. People like meat, of course, in Europe. So the cuisine that they actually sell, the Indian cuisine, which actually sells, is the Muslim cuisine of subcontinent. And it's actually what we have in Pakistan. So it's more Pakistani cuisine than Indian cuisine. And actually, most of these restaurants are owned by Pakistanis. So Peshawar has, amongst other things, this amazing cuisine. That there's this, like Namak Mandi in Peshawar, where if you go, you would be amazed by the food there. Now, in terms of the background of your question, the problems about terrorism, you see Peshawar is a very vibrant city. I mean, you can go there, enjoy. The minister comes from there, it's the capital of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. That's not his hometown. But the point is that there's no challenge there as such. As we all know, in this city, you're living in Berlin, I think I live in Berlin. 2 years back, I was having my dinner at a restaurant, and suddenly the restaurant manager announced that just half a kilometer from here, there has been a big terror incident. That was the Christmas market terror incident in Berlin 2 years ago. You would recall that. So the point is, terrorism can happen anywhere in the world. It happened in Paris. It happened in Brussels many times. It happened in London many times, in Manchester, in the US, as we know. I can keep on naming cities. But the thing is, that is just like any city of the world can have traffic accidents. Any city of the world can have the problem of street crime. And actually, let me tell you something. In terms of street crimes, Pakistani cities are much safer than cities in Europe and in America sometimes. I think I do recall this pretty often. When I was studying in America, and I have wonderful memories of studying there, it's a great country. But when I was living in Philadelphia in the 80s, it was so dangerous that if I have to compare it with Lahore is a cakewalk, or Karachi is a cakewalk compared to, because Philadelphia of the 80s, you could venture out at night at your own risk and cost, in the downtown of the city. And same was the case with Washington and New York and London and many other cities. So the thing is, that you see, there's no place in the world which would be sterile. It has to be a bubble then, basically to be so safe. But that is one of the things about tourism. When you go to a place, you read about the place a bit. For example, Brazil is such an amazing country. I've lived there for 4 years. But we all know that Rio, which in my view is probably the most beautiful city in the world, it's also a very dangerous city in the world. Sao Paulo is so dangerous, in certain places. that people don't even stop their cars at red light. You know why? Because if they stop their car, sometimes people just come with a gun and, place it on the windshield. I've seen that happening there. So the thing is that, yes, we've had problems of terrorism in the past, but, the good thing is that we have come out of that phase. We are now as safe as like any country in the world in terms of tourism. And like I said, for the last many years, there has been no incident of terrorism involving tourists. So that, on the other hand, for example, if you go to India, it's generally considered to be a safe country, but we all know that Delhi has been termed as the rape capital of the world. There's so many incidents involving foreign tourists in particular. So the point is, but that doesn't mean that Delhi is not a city where you shouldn't. It's a city where you shouldn't go. You should still go. It's got an amazing history. You just have to be a little more careful, and that you have to be in a lot of places in the world. You have to keep yourself safe by just practicing some, basic, just taking some basic precautions. Yes, please. But there has to be a question in it as well. Let's come up with a question.
Okay, sure. So basically, my family is built Malam Jawar.
Oh, great.
So, and I think that's a really good example of the kind of thing you were talking about. So, there was Malam Jawar is basically in the Swat Valley, which was basically taken over for a period of time. Pakistan has this bad patch where, the Taliban took over this area. And it became the de facto headquarters. Yeah, exactly. So Malam Jawar is where, it became the Taliban kind of took over this part of Pakistan, and they used this and there was actually a beautiful ski resort built by the Austrian government for the government of Pakistan, and the Taliban took this over and made it their headquarters. This place eventually, the army came in and they broke them out, but in that process, that whole place, the hotel, everything got destroyed. So this was, a really rough patch, a really difficult time. But, sometimes once security and peace was restored in this area, the government came up with a really nice idea to revive this project. And our family came in and we got the project from the government to build, operate, and transfer that. And now if you look at the place, and you can see, there are lots of relics. So when we went in, it looked like a war zone. There was like really shells that we still found while there was everything. But anyway, now, so we have this slogan in the country that a lot of people are from terrorism to tourism.
Yeah, that's a good one. Very good. I think let me expound on that. That's a very good point. And, we salute people like you, who have really contributed to restoring Swat to its past glory. You see, that is such a good example because it is not only Pakistan. I was ambassador to Bosnia. I've seen that in Bosnia. Bosnia was a place totally destroyed in war. But after the war, when they've restored, like cities like Mostar with that beautiful bridge and Sarajevo and now it's like a jewel in that region now. Sri Lanka, look at Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, tourism was totally destroyed during the civil war. There was a point when the terrorists were so strong that they actually came and destroyed all the main airport with all the aircraft, many of the aircraft in it at least. But now, Sri Lanka is back, and it's all and all its like a former glory. Similarly, in Pakistan, places like Swat at one time was occupied by the Taliban. But not only, they have been eliminated. It has been restored, and now there's so much tourism again happening there. And that happens in a lot of places in the world. Of course, this Berlin, for instance, it was destroyed 90% during the Second World War. We all know, but look, it has been now it has come up with such a great city, back in its like that glorious architecture and that amazing culture and it has such a unique. Now it's Berlin. It's supposed to be the city which never sleeps. So this happens everywhere in the world. In Pakistan, and in fact, we sometimes laugh about it. That in Pakistan, we should also start a niche of some, a new sort of tourism, and that could be sort of, like like just reminding ourselves what it used to be in the times of, for example, in some certain areas when the Taliban were there or something, because even that could be, like in America, people sometimes have this cowboy tourism or something, like relics of a certain era. So basically, yes, we've had all those challenges, but in the last few years, most of those challenges have been eliminated. Pakistan is now again becoming a very hot attraction for tourists the world over. And the good thing is that it's still inexpensive to go there. There's still a lot new to explore there, a lot to discover there. Great. Please. Okay, good. So yeah, there are two aspects to your question. One is about women. So if like how much Pakistan is safe for women. It's as safe for women as in the big cities as Berlin is. In Pakistan, okay, because every country has its own culture naturally. Like in Pakistan, you see women dressed, like in a slightly more conservative way than probably you'd find in many Western countries. But that doesn't mean that you won't find in Pakistan women wearing jeans or sort of, like, I see that very often, like, the T-shirts and everything. The point is that, in fact, in Pakistan, there's a lot of respect is given to women. There's a lot of premium on modesty as well. And, remember what I said earlier, for instance, which are the countries which are not safe for women? The countries where you have a lot of incidents of foreign women getting raped or getting sort of assaulted or something. You will never find Pakistan in the news in that regard. You always find countries like India or some other countries, In Pakistan, those type of incidents normally don't happen. And the reason is, it's a conservative country, yes. But at the same time, people really put a lot of effort and put a lot of premium on keeping women safe, The second part of your question is about, like, okay, what we have shown here is about Gilgit-Baltistan and northern Pakistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Part of the reason is that today our stall in the ITB is also basically focusing on these two regions of Pakistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Gilgit-Baltistan. And we have the Minister of the Pakhtunkhwa, Senior Minister of Pakhtunkhwa here. And also we have a delegation from Gilgit-Baltistan, there's a minister there as well, who's, So the point is, that is the reason. But that is, like you said, okay, you're showing that because it's kind of, okay, it's all good. And the other region is controversial. No, that is not true. In fact, that is the opposite. In the sense that when we faced the scourge of terrorism, there was a lot of problems in the province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. That is, in parts of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, that is where the Taliban were based, for instance, in Swat. Swat is part of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa as well. Similarly, people were worried about Gilgit-Baltistan as well at one point. The other parts of Pakistan, even when we had this scourge of terrorism, like for instance in Lahore, all these years, Lahore was generally a pretty safe city. Islamabad was a fairly safe city. So the problem was actually more in these regions. that I've shown actually, and not in the sort of southern part of Pakistan as much. Why I'm showcasing these? Because, of course, because they're beautiful. They're just unique in terms of the landscape and the culture. But also because these are the very regions where we face the brunt of terrorism, and we have been able to clean them up. We have been able to eliminate that terrorism. We have been able to have success stories like mentioned by this young guy here, our friend, who mentioned about Sawat. Remember, Sawat was the place from where this Malala comes from, I mean, that is the place where you had all those Taliban and sort of, all those stories. And today, it's a thriving tourism place. So that is the turnaround I want to highlight upon. Yes, please. Mm-hmm.
And recently, security issues.
Yeah.
So I would like to ask how, to what extent this media affect.
Very good point. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
To what extent affect Pakistan tourism sector, and also I'd like to ask you. You said that since or in the last years, Pakistan is improving in such security and safety and those issues. So if it's been improved, is there any statistics or figures that show that there is increase in the development or tourism?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I'll take you the last part first. Yes, definitely. It's very, very clear in the figures that we have that it's improving. Like tourism in Pakistan in the last few years have jumped many-fold. Like I'm talking about doubled and doubled like that. So that is the answer to that. Now let's go back to your earlier questions. I've already mentioned the problems that we'd had. We had some severe issues of terrorism. But again, what happens is, there's this international media which has certain tilts. Media is not always totally unbiased, first of all. Secondly, media, by the definition, always focuses on the negative. For example, if there's a bomb explosion in a place, let's say somewhere in Pakistan, this is big news. But on the other hand, if there's a village in Pakistan and they have done an amazing work, and they're, in that village, people have just turned around the whole thing. And, it's an example, even let's say for a lot of countries, that will not be a news. Nobody will carry that news somehow. See, there are a lot of misperceptions about Pakistan out there. This image of Pakistan, unfortunately, because of all those years, it has been tainted. And it has been tainted because of the negative projection. Now, I don't want to go into the reasons of those of the underlying reasons of that negative projection. There could be many reasons. We do not live in a fair world. We all know that. You're students and you read a lot of stuff. I mean, the real world works on realpolitik. The real world works on the interests of money and interest. Like sometimes strategic compulsion. Sometimes sort of the media's. I mean, the media always have segments which have their own twists, and their own kind of biases. Pakistan was a focus of international media for the last 10, 15 years, but for all the wrong reasons, unfortunately. And that has left our brand a bit battered, Now, when things change and when things improve, it takes time for the international media to reckon that. First, probably a few articles will appear, then some more. Then as people start going into that region, It's a story which we have seen for many places like Sri Lanka, for instance. It's a story we have seen for Brazil as well. There was I was living in Brazil, and Brazil got such bad media that their tourism suffered. It's a story which is relevant for Egypt as well. Egypt at one time was facing some Islamic fundamentalism. There were certain as it's called in the West, there were certain terrorist incidents there. And after that, tourism just stopped there, although they have such an amazing infrastructure of tourism. And then it took them many years to repair that image, And they did that in a very scientific way, by the way. They developed regional brands, like Red Sea Riviera and the pyramids and everything. And actually, they excluded the word Egypt for a few years. They just took it out, just to focus on what they had. So basically, it takes time. It will take Pakistan some time as well. We know that. But the thing is that the tide has turned. For the last 2-3 years, the numbers of tourists, like just in GB, for example, Gilgit-Baltistan, the number of tourists crossed 1 million. That is, compared to that, let me say a few years back, it was just 100,000, 10 times more. So similarly is the case of other regions in Pakistan. The economic numbers are getting much more positive. The country is becoming much safer. Lastly, you talked about women's rights in Pakistan. In terms of women's rights, this is not directly related to the tourism sector. But I would say that compared to other countries in the same, because you can't compare orange and apples. You can't compare, for example, Sweden with India, because they have a totally different per capita income. They have a totally different level of industrialization, of education, of literacy. Everything is different. But if you compare Pakistan with middle income countries, which are equivalent in terms of per capita and equivalent in terms of level of education and everything, Pakistan is actually much better in terms of, in terms of human rights and in terms of women's rights. Look, I'm sure you must be following news. What is happening in Kashmir? Do you follow that? What is happening to women's rights there? What has happened to human rights there? So many other parts of the world, I can give so many examples. But Pakistan in that way is much better than the comparison. You're welcome. Any other questions? Thank you again.